All right, let's dive in. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on a world most of us, thankfully, never see: the front lines of family court. We're talking about the immense, invisible stress on the staff who guard the system, and, more importantly, the incredible playbook they use to protect themselves.
Just imagine for a second standing behind a public counter, and this is what you hear. All day long. It's just a relentless wave of raw panic, anger, and desperation from people who are at the absolute worst moment of their lives.
So, where does all that pain and pressure go? It has to land somewhere. The big question is, who's on the other side of that counter? Who is actually absorbing this constant emotional tidal wave day in and day out? Well, we tend to think of judges and lawyers, right? But the real front line of the justice system, it's the clerks, the judicial assistants, the administrative staff. They're not just pushing paper. They are the system's emotional first responders. And being exposed to that level of crisis, that constant pressure to bend a rule just this once for someone who's clearly suffering, that can lead to a very specific kind of psychological damage. It's called moral injury. It's that deep, gut-wrenching distress that comes from feeling like you've been forced to violate your own sense of what's right. What's really fascinating, though, is that this pressure isn't random. Nope. It actually follows some very predictable patterns. People who are trying to bend the rules, well, they tend to use the same tactics over and over. So let's break down a few of the most common ones. Okay, first up, we've got the bending time tactic. A lawyer rushes in, 5 minutes past the deadline, pleading, "Come on, just stamp it as received earlier." The pressure is just immense. But look at the defense. It's simple, but it's powerful. I have to apply the same process to both sides. See, it's not a personal no. It's a procedural yes to fairness. Or how about this one? Playing favorites. Someone calls a scheduling clerk and says, "Just squeeze us in, you gotta help us out." The defense script here is brilliant because it completely reframes the situation. It's not about saying no to you. It's about making sure everyone gets a fair shot. It takes it from a personal favor to a core principle of the system. And then there's this one, which is just nasty. It's weaponizing guilt. The person basically implies that if something awful happens, it's going to be your fault. But watch how the defense diffuses this bomb. It starts by acknowledging their feelings. I hear the urgency, which is huge. But then it pivots right back to the safety of policy. It validates the emotion without taking on the guilt. It's a masterclass. So here's the crucial point. These staff members don't have to just stand there and take it. There is a deliberate, teachable playbook that's designed to protect their integrity and, honestly, their sanity. It's a system of what we can call shields and guardrails. And let's just pause on that term again, moral injury. It's so important to get this. This is not just burnout or having a bad day. It's a specific wound that comes from being forced into a position where you feel like you've compromised your own core values. This whole playbook is designed to prevent that very wound. And this playbook really breaks down into 3 core parts. Think of them like layers of defense. First, you've got shield scripts. That's your verbal armor. Second, workflow guardrails, which are like procedural force fields. And third, something called micro-recoveries, which are basically instant mental resets for when the stress starts to break through. So shield scripts are just so powerful because they are pre-loaded responses. You don't have to think one up while you're feeling attacked. The key is they're short, they're repeatable, they're based on procedure, not your personal feelings, and most importantly, they create a firm boundary that doesn't invite an argument. Okay, next up are the workflow guardrails. This is where the abstract rules become real, physical tools. We're talking about a printed checklist you have to follow, a standard email template for a common problem, a really clear rule for when you have to get a supervisor. These things turn the right action into the easy action. They're basically safety systems for fairness. So this all sounds pretty good in theory, right? But how does it actually work when things get heated? Let's walk through a really high-stakes scenario and see these tools in action. All right, picture this. You're a judicial assistant. The phone rings. It's somebody involved in a case, and they're trying to secretly feed their side of the story directly to the judge. This is what's known as an ex parte communication, and it is a massive ethical no-no. It could completely compromise the entire case. The pressure is on. And here it is, the playbook, executed perfectly. First, you deploy the shield script. It's a clear, firm stop sign. I can't receive case facts. Boom. Second, you lean on the workflow guardrail. Maybe it's a little script taped right by the phone, so you say the exact right thing without having to improvise. And third, After you hang up, the micro recovery. You stand up, roll your shoulders, take one long breath out. You physically shed the stress. Threat neutralized, integrity protected. Beautiful. But let's be real, some stress is always going to get through. So what about that? Imagine you're a courtroom clerk and you've just sat through hours of absolutely gut-wrenching testimony. For this exact situation, there's an incredible technique called the 3-2-1 closure. Here's how it works. First, you silently list 3 facts that you recorded correctly during the hearing. This immediately grounds you in your professional competence. It's a reminder, I did my job and I did it right. Second, you name 2 boundaries you successfully held. Maybe you had to enforce the exhibit rules or you redirected an attorney's improper question. This reinforces your own agency. It reminds you that you were in control of your role. And finally, this is the most important step. You identify one thing from that hearing that is not yours to carry home. The family's grief, the person's anger, the final outcome of the case. You make a conscious decision to leave that emotional weight right there in the courtroom. So you might be thinking, okay, that's great, but I don't work in a courthouse. So why does any of this matter to you? Because these aren't just tools for legal clerks. This playbook is a masterclass in how to set professional boundaries, how to manage stress, and how to protect your integrity in any high-pressure job. And that brings us to what might be the single most useful tool for anybody, anywhere: the unethical request triage ladder. It's a simple 5-step process for any time a request just feels off. You clarify what they're really asking. You force them to put it in writing. You apply the official policy. You document what happened, and you escalate if you feel threatened. It's a system for protecting yourself. Because in the end, the quiet, consistent, and often thankless job these folks do, it isn't just bureaucracy. The simple act of applying the rules fairly to everyone, that is the firewall that protects the integrity of the entire justice system for all of us. And that really leaves us with one last thought to chew on. We depend on these court staff to uphold a system that's absolutely critical to our society. It kind of makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other invisible structures and what other invisible people are you depending on right now to keep your world running smoothly and fairly?